Hello and welcome back to another How to Django tutorial. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. In this upcoming tutorials in the How to Django, we're going to take a look at creating a blog application. Yeah, I know everybody creates a blog application on YouTube, but this is a great starting point. And the reason for that is because when we create a blog, it gives us the steps needed to create data, display data, modify data, delete data, and what we're going to focus on is creating a full application here. So it will have its own back end where you can modify the data for administrators. Yeah, we'll look at the Django admin site, but I tend not to use that. Also, it will allow you to display blog posts to the user and stuff like that. So you're going to learn a lot through these next couple of tutorials. Today we're going to focus on creating an application and working with the models and creating our tables and our fields in the database. So that's our main focus for today. So let's get started. To create an application in Django, we need to be in the directory that contains manage.py. So let's go ahead and just list out our directory. And you notice I'm currently in the one that has manage.py. Manage.py handles most of our commands for Django projects. So if we want to create a new application, we do Python manage.py start app, and then we give the app a name. We're going to call it blog. All right. So now what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and create some default files in the blog directory for us. And these default files are normally the files that you'll be using to create your applications. So in your text editor, mine might take a moment to show up, so I'm going to pause it. Of course, once I push the pause button, it shows up. All right, so we got our blog application here. All right, and it's inside the blog application is contained in a directory. Inside the directory, you have the migrations folder, and our directory, I should say. And what the migrations does is when we migrate our models, which is what configures our database, the files go in here. So the configuration files for the Django database live inside the migrations directory. All right. If you go and delete this, you might screw up Django, especially if you delete the init file. And if you notice, this one has an init file, and so does this one. And what's the init file? The init file indicates to Python that this directory contains Python files. All right. The next one it creates for us is the admin.py. And we'll talk about that in the next tutorial, but what the admin.py file does, it allows us to configure the admin site for Django. Django provides a really cool default admin site. But I tend not to use that very much, but so in the next tutorial I'll show you how to work with it, but I try to keep my focus off the admin.py site, and I build my own custom backends. Most of my clients want this, and also it gives me more security and peace of mind when working with it, because I have full control over what's getting passed to the database and how people are accessing that. So that's why I build my own backends. Now the apps.py file, this file basically is the configuration file for our apps, and we'll look at that in a little bit. You guys probably wouldn't understand it if I explained it to you right now. The next one is what we're going to work with today, and that's the models.py file. Like I said before, we put in code in here. We create classes, subclasses of the model, which will allow us to go ahead and configure our database, our tables, and our fields in our database. All right, the test.py file, we'll eventually take a look at this. Basically, what we do is we write test in the test.py file, and it tests our application. All right, and then finally, but not least, the views.py file. We saw this already in a previous tutorial where we just created a basic view and displayed something to the user. That's the views handle and direct our request and response. Okay. So that's the basic layout of an application folder. Like I said before, we can have a lot more files in here. So as we move into more advanced applications inside our tutorial series here, you'll see me starting to put some more files in here. I'll show you all how that works. Alright, so the next thing you do after you create an application, you don't have to look at all these files like I did, but next thing you want to do is go into your main project file, and you got settings.py. Inside the settings.py file, if you open it up, and you go all the way up to the top, or right here, installed apps, alright, we're going to put in our newest app, and that's called blog. So we hit return, and inside a string, we just type in blog, and then add a comma outside the string. Alright, this indicates to Django, hey, we got a blog application out there. So when we do something like migrate our database, Django knows to go ahead and find that blog application and run whatever command we're passing for that. Alright, so that's how that works. Alright, next thing we want to do is open up our models.py file. And then inside our models.py file, we're going to go ahead and create our first subclass of models, model, I should say. And what this does is it's creating a table in our database. Alright, so our blog application is going to have two tables. It's going to have a category table, and it's going to have a post table. Alright, so the category would be the category of our blog post, and then the post would be the actual blog post itself. Alright, so let's go ahead and create the category first. So we create a class, and then we call it whatever you want, but I'm going to call mine category, and we're going to say models.model. Alright, so this makes it the subclass of the model class. Alright, so we go into models, into the models directory, if you will, and then we make a subclass of model. Alright, sorry, I take a break and get some water there. I'm not feeling too hot today. So next thing we want to do, so the category, the class category, the subclass here represents a table in the database. The next thing we want to do is create a field. Our first field is going to be the title of the category. So title is equal to, and we're going to say models. Alright, so we're going inside the models directory, and then we're going to get char field. Alright, so a character field, if you will, a char field takes one required argument, and that's the max length. The max length of characters allowed in this field. You can make it to whatever you want. I kind of tend to set max length to 250. Alright, and you're going to see as we move down here, we're actually going to create an SEO title as well, and we're going to set that to the recommended length of the actual SEO titles that Google's approving right now, or likes to see right now. But we'll talk about that in a second. Alright, so the title is going to be the title of our category, alright? And we're allowed 250 characters in there. And then characters include spaces and numbers, so everything is 250 long, alright? Next thing we're going to create is a description. Now, it's completely up to you, but in some projects, when I display the category, the client likes to see have the ability to filter to that category, where the users are able to say, hey, if I want a Python category, I click on Python, and it will display all the blog posts about Python. Alright, in there I like to add a description, not only for SEO purposes, but also give a rundown to the user what this actually is. So we're going to create a description field inside our table, and what we're going to do is use this as a char field as well. Alright, and the reason I don't use a text field here is just because we kind of, we need models.char field. I kind of don't want the user to go completely off and make this huge super post, or the client make a huge super long description when you don't need it. So, I mean, this is completely up to what you want to do, your specifications, or if you're working with a client, what their specifications are. But this is my normal setup normally. The next thing we're going to do is create an SEO title. Now, the reason I create an an extra title. And this is the one that goes inside the title tags in the HTML document. The reason why I do this is because sometimes you want to display a certain title to the user, and this title is something the user would most likely be clicking on versus what Google wants to click on, all right? So kind of with the SEO title, you can focus it more towards keyword, hey, this is what I want to be Google to grab my website as, versus, hey, this is what I want the user to click on. So it's another thing that's up to you. So I do SEO title, models.char field, and then I'm going to call this max length as 60. 60 is about what SEO specialists are recommending for Google right now, so we'll try to keep it around 60. I'm also going to add blank is true, and what this says is, hey, this field can be blank. Or we're going to add null is true, and basically we're saying, hey, this field can be null as well. And the reason I do this is if I don't want to add an SEO title, I don't have to. All right. I also do SEO description. All right. And this is what will go into the meta description field. And this allows me to modify the blog post to suit whatever I'm trying to rank for on Google. So we'll set up SEO description as well, and we'll do models .char field, and then we'll set a max length of, I don't know, 165. That's about what they're recommending for that. And we'll also do blank is true and null is true. This way, if I don't want to, I don't have to put it in. All right. Now, the next thing I want to do is add a slug field. And for you guys who haven't worked much with websites, a slug field is a nice representation of a URL. Oops, hold on one second. I'm trying to get an example. All right, so right here you got MasterCode Online, and this is the back end kind of right now. Anyhow, it's been completely modified. I haven't updated it yet, but basically what a slug field would be something like this: new tutorial. All right, so if I want to put in a new tutorial in here, basically this is what I would do as a slug field. But in our case, what we want to do is for our category, we want the slug field to be the title of our category, right? For SEO purposes. So slug is equal to models.slug field. And then in here, we're going to go ahead and set the max length to 200. All right. And then set the unique to true. And unique to true means there's no other field in this table, in category table, that has the same name as a slug. Because if you had the same name, we wouldn't be able to display it, because then the server would get confused, like which object am I showing. So that's why almost everybody sets unique to true here in the slug field. I'm going to add another field that's called created. And what created does is when our object is created in our database, it's going to record a date and time. All right. So we want to go ahead and do date time field. All right. And then we're going to say auto now add equal to true. So what auto now add does is it says, hey, when this object's created, record that time into the database. All right. So auto now add will record the time when the object's initially created. All right. Now we're going to create another field called updated, and we'll call this models.date date time field again, and this time we're going to say auto now is equal to true. So the difference between these two is this, every time the object's saved, will save the date time field. So anytime it's updated, it's going to save it. This one is only on the initial save of that object. Okay. All right, so that's basically how our fields are going to be set up. Sorry. So next thing we need to do is configure our title to be saved in our Slug field. All right. So to do that, we're going to use something called Slugify. So we're going to say from Django, what is it? Template dot default filters, import Slugify. All right. And then down here, we want to create a new save method. And what it's going to do is we're going to take the title and we're going to save it to the slug field. And the Slugify allows us to do that. So we're going to create a new method. We're going to call it save. All right. It's going to take self, and then it's going to take args and keyword args like this. All right. Then we're going to say self.slug is equal to, and we're going to say slugify, and then self.title. Now, if you guys haven't worked with classes or object-oriented programming in Python, anytime we're calling it an attribute, which are these up here basically in a class, we need to call self on them to save or to access those. So we're saying basically the object is self. So when we're saving an object, for example, a category called Python, we're saying, hey, get self. So it would be python.slug, and it will come in here and find slug. And we're going to save python.title in that slug. All right. So that's how that all works. So then the next thing we're going to do is, since we're working with the subclass of model, we need to call super. So we have to call super because we're calling the super class, which is model. And we're going to say category. And category is our subclass. So we're saying the super class and then the subclass. And then we're going to say self. So now we're passing our self object in there, and then we're going to save, and we're going to save args and keyword. Ooh, keyword args. All right. So that's how we save the title in the slug field. All right. And what Slugify is going to do is it's going to take it. Say our title was Learn Python, like this. All right. Say that's our title. What Slugify is going to do is going to take that and take out the space and put a hyphen. It's going to take out the capitals and make them lowercase, like this. And what it does is it ends up making a nice slug that's human readable and also something that Google loves. So that's what we're doing here. So we got SEO in mind. All right. And then one last thing I want to do is create another method, and we're going to use this method to display the name of our object, if you will. How do we want our object displayed? And we'll see this in action in the next tutorial when we jump into admin. So what we're going to do is we're going to define a new method, and we're going to call it it's __ string, and then __, and then inside parentheses we're passing self. So self on the object would be, for example, Python. So we're passing Python. And then we're going to say return self.title. So we're getting the Python object and the title of that object. All right. So there you go. There's our category class inside our, I shouldn't say our category class. That's our category table inside our database when we migrate it. It's not there yet. It's not in the database yet, but we'll take a look at that shortly. But this is the table, and these are the fields inside our database. All right. And then we use some helpers down here to modify how we want this information or this data passed into our database. All right, cool. So there we go. There's our category. But now we need post. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to fly through this one versus, because it's basically the same layout, and I want to bang this out. So let's go ahead, class, and we're going to call our table post, and we're going to call it models.model, because we're calling the subclass of model. All right, in here we're going to have title, and that's going to be the same as above. So models.char field, then it's going to be max length 250. And the next one we're going to have is body, and body is going to be models.text field. Now the text field has no required arguments. It can be as long as it possibly wants to be, or until the database is full. So that takes no required arguments. Next one we want to talk about is we're going to pull in a foreign key, which a foreign key is a one-to-many relationship. So we're going to have, many-to-one relationship. So we got many of blog posts with one category. All right. So we're going to bring in the foreign key, the relationship, into here. So we're going to say category, and then we're going to set that equal to models.foreign key, like that, and then we call the table that we want to bring into that foreign key, and that's going to be category. All right, and that's all we have to do. Now we have access through our post to the category table. All right. Alright, so the next one we want to do is set up the SEO title, just like we did above. So we're going to do SEO underscore title. We're going to set that equal to models.char field. And this is going to be a max length of 60. And we'll set blank equal to true and null equal to true. Alright. And same thing with SEO description, models.char field, max length, I don't remember what we set it to, 165, and the same, blank is equal to true and null is equal to true. Alright. Now I also want to add a well, actually, while we're on SEO, let's go ahead and just add the slug as well. And then I'll show you something. Models.slug field. Alright, and we're going to say max length is 200. And then unique is equal to true. Now, it's unique, I don't know if I mentioned it, unique true is only for that table, alright? So if we had a category called Python and a post called Python, that is possible. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is set up a status, our choice for our project. What I mean by that is our post published or is it a draft? Alright, so we can configure that. So up here, I tend to put it here, we're going to create a choice field which contains a tuple that contains tuples which contains choices. Alright, so normally you put these in all caps. Whoops. Status underscore choices. Alright, we're going to set that equal to a tuple. And then inside that tuple, we're going to put another tuple, and we're going to call this published. And then comma, and then published. Alright. So this is what gets saved in the database on the left-hand side, and this is what's displayed to either us or the user on the front end. All right, but in this case, we can just save it as published and display it as published. All right. Down the road, you might see me do something a little different in that configuration, but for this, it's quite okay to just set it up this way. All right, there we go. The colon's not there because we're not working with the dictionary. It's just a comma. All right, so there we go. We got our tuple set up. So now, how do we hook that into a field in our table? Well, we just simply create a field called status. We'll do models.char field, and it'll set the max length to, we'll just call it 10. You want to make sure you have more than what's in here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't know if I count it right, but it's definitely less than 10. So that works for me. And then we're going to set a default here. So we want a default value. So if I forget to set it when I'm creating a blog post, I want it to default to draft, because you may not be ready to post it. You don't want to post information that's not correct or proofread or something like that. So we'll just set it to draft. And then we hook in the choices by using choices. And we'll call status choices in there. All right. So now Django knows, hey, these are our 2 choices up here, and we're going to hook it into this char field here. So that's all pretty simple right there. We need to go ahead and create our create it time. So create it models.date time field like this, and we're just going to say auto now underscore add is equal to true. And I explained this before. Update it. It's the same thing. Models.date time field, and this one's going to be auto. Oops. Underscore now is equal to true. All right. So we got our slug. We got all that configured. Next thing we're going to do is create this, basically the same method we did above to save our title into our slug field. So we're going to define, save, and it's going to take self. It's going to take args. It's going to take keyword args. All right, so there are our parameters, and then we're going to say self.slug is equal to slugify, and then self.title. All right, and then we're going to call super, and then we're going to call post self and dot save, and it's going to take args and keyword args. Cool. So there's our save method, and then we're just going to need our display, which I like to call it, but it's our string. How are we going to represent the object? And we're just going to return self.title. There you go. Go ahead and save that if you have to, depending on your text editor. And there you go. There's our blog tables and fields configured. All right. Now let's go ahead into our terminal here, and we're going to migrate our database. So the way we do that is we're going to call Python manage.py make migrations. All right. If you remember, in our migrations folder, the only thing in there is underscore underscore init. All right, and that just indicates that this directory contains Python files. I'm gonna hit return in the terminal, and we got an error. I spelled default wrong. So that was down here, right here. Default. There, that's how you spell default. Let's go ahead and just run the same command. I'll push up. There we go. Alright, so we created the migrations, and it's located in the blog migrations, and it's 0001 initial migrate. And it created the model for category and the model for post. So if we go back and look inside our migrations folder, right here, you'll see it. And this is what the migration file actually looks like. So basically, it's a class or subclass of migration. All right. And it gives all the information to configure the database. If you look through, all our information that we added into the models is right here. Now, I would say 98% of the time you don't look in this file, you don't mess with this file, but there is a time that you may want to, all right? But normally you don't mess with it. But if you look at it, this is how it's all configured, all right? So the next command is going to take this file and create the database inside our actual database. So it's going to set up the tables and files. Alright, so the last thing we need to do is actually push it. I'm sorry, my son interrupted and I don't remember where I was. So we're going to do Python manage.py migrate. And this is going to actually create the database, the tables and fields. So there we go. Currently, we're unable to actually look at if it was actually created because in SQLite 3 we can't actually read the code or the configuration of the tables. So in the next tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to set up the admin, then we can actually work with our database. So I'll see you in the next tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Otherwise, I'll see you then.